What's up, guys? Fantasy Joe here, back with some more fantasy football content for the 2021 season. This week, we have some Dynasty Buy Low players that we're going to be going over. Some guys I think that if you are buying them now in a Dynasty League can help you win some championships in these coming years. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe, drop a like on this video if you enjoy it, and comment down below. Alright, first guy up, we have Jameis Winston. Jameis is currently ranked outside the top 25 Dynasty QBs on a lot of lists, which is one of the main reasons that he is on this list. Jameis is going to be, I believe, the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. There's rumors of Brees coming back, which is why I think right now is the perfect time to capitalize and go ahead and make an acquisition on Jameis right now. We'll have some uncertainty whether or not he'll be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints next year. As far as fantasy goes, Jameis has always dominated basically in fantasy these last several years. In 2019, he finished at quarterback 3 overall, averaging 20.96 fantasy points per game. And in 2018, in the games that he started, he averaged 19.3 fantasy points per game. On Jameis' 16-game pace in 2018 would have ended him up as quarterback 8. All of these things, I think, combine with the New Orleans system that he's had a year of learning. It's not like he's just being thrust in as going to be the first-year starter. He's had an entire year to sit there behind Drew Brees and learn that offense, learn how it works. He has the confidence of the coaching staff. I don't think Sean Payton's a stupid head coach by any means. And it's looking like now that they have every intention of bringing him back to be the guy. They saw something in him that made them believe that he could do it, that they didn't believe in Taysom Hill, even though they've talked him up for all this time. So the fact that they're moving on from Taysom shows me that they're pretty confident in Jameis and his ability to perform. And I think that in this system, he's going to be really good for fantasy. And I just think, you know what, if it doesn't work out, who cares? You're going to be trading, a late second round rookie pick or something for Jameis Winston, or some random wide receiver that you have a depth piece, something like that. I think he could give you a top 12 quarterback potentially this year, maybe even next year. Who knows? Maybe he's a long-term answer in New Orleans. I don't know if he's that good as a football player, as an actual quarterback, but for fantasy, I think that he'll be able to produce definitely this year. I think he's just ranked far too low because of what I think will happen. I think that these Drew Brees rumors of him coming back is the time to capitalize on Jameis Winston if you have a need for a dynasty quarterback for these next few years. Moving on to our next player, a younger player, we've got A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon is a large and explosive power back with solid hands. He is 6 foot, 247 pounds. He ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, which is very quick for somebody of that size. He had a 41-inch vertical jump and a broad jump of 131 inches. The reason I put those in there is because you see the 6 foot, 247. I mean, he weighs as much as Derrick Henry does, and he's 3 inches shorter. So this guy is built like an absolute hoss of a man. But he is very explosive as well. That broad jump and that vertical are both higher than Derrick Henry's were at the combine as well. And that's just one of the big things for power backs is you want to look at that broad jump and that vertical jump to see how explosive they are. And A.J. Dillon was extremely explosive even for his size. I think there are concerns about his lateral quickness, but I'm not too concerned about those things. I think he's got solid enough hands, and the team has invested so heavily with their draft capital, selecting him number 62 overall in the second round last year, that I definitely think that the Green Bay Packers have every intention of handing over the starting role to A.J. Dillon. Now, the opportunity to be seized. So right now, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are both free agents. We don't know, maybe the Packers go out and franchise tag Aaron Jones. They're currently in a pretty tight cap situation, though, so that looks unlikely. So most likely, A.J. Dillon is going to be there with 320 carries vacant and 78 running back receptions from last year that are going to leave the team in free agency most likely if they don't retain Aaron Jones or Jamal Williams. He also had a flash of greatness in his rookie year. Not only was he very productive at Boston College, but last year in the one start that he got when Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams were both out, he went for 21 carries for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. He dominated against the Tennessee Titans. And he's shown us some stuff, carrying guys on his back on a few plays. He wasn't heavily utilized last year, but we've seen the talent of what he can do in the football field. And I think that the team believes in him a great deal, as you can see from that draft capital. And I think this was a move made last year with every intention of him being the guy this year. He's had some time to learn, and now he might not be a guy who you can go get for, he's a rookie and people know that he's probably going to be the guy in Green Bay. But I don't think it's a certain thing yet. And I think that you could go out there and put some feelers out there. I mean, A.J. Dillon, he'd be a guy, if I'm a rebuilding team and I have someone like Derrick Henry, I'd be trying to sell Derrick Henry to someone who's got A.J. Dillon, pick up a top rookie pick or a great wide receiver as well, and sell high on somebody like that or a talented running back, an older back. I would try to swap out for A.J. Dillon, thinking I'm going to get 2 to 3 years of him being on the Green Bay Packers for sure, and maybe more after that. But I really do think that he's going to have every opportunity to get the ball and to be a workhorse in fantasy football in 2021 and upcoming years. So I would definitely try to acquire him in Dynasty football leagues. Next up, we have Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas has caught at least 90 passes and had at least 1,100 yards every single season except for his injured 2020 season. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think people are forgetting a little bit just how good Michael Thomas is. I'm seeing him ranked as like a borderline top 10 dynasty wide receiver. I just think that's far too low. I think he's easily a top 5, 6 guy, no doubt. And I mean, he's just shown it. And he's caught 9 touchdowns in 3 of his 4 healthy seasons. He's only missed 1 game before this season as well, so it's not like he's some injury-prone receiver. He'd missed 1 game before this year. And yeah, he played a lot this year and was unproductive, but I think a lot of that was due to the fact that he wanted to play because he knew this was going to be Drew Brees last season. That's why he was out there, even though he probably shouldn't have been. And then Michael Thomas has also dominated without Drew Brees in the past. Last season, in 2019, when he caught 149 passes, in the 5 games that he played with Teddy Bridgewater, he averaged 21.6 fantasy points per game and scored at least 12.9 fantasy points in every game that he played with Teddy Bridgewater. I think Jameis is better than Teddy Bridgewater right now, and I think he's much better for a fantasy receiver than Teddy Bridgewater is or Drew Brees was last year. Jameis really likes to throw the ball down the field a lot more than Brees. So even though Michael Thomas is called slant boy and all this stuff, I think that he's going to still get a lot of those slants, get a lot of those receptions. He's not going to, be a 20 reception type of guy all of a sudden. But I think, what if he starts getting some more down the field targets? Like Drew Brees last year, his intended air yards per pass attempt was 6.1 in 2020. And just to put that in perspective, it was down from 2019, but it was 6.4 intended air yards per pass attempt in 2019. Let's put that in perspective, though. Jameis in 2019 was at 10.4, the year that he finished as quarterback 3 and threw the 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions, that famous season. But the year before that as well, he was at 10.8 intended air yards per pass attempt. So I think that's a massive increase. I mean, that's ridiculous, honestly. And I just think that that's bound to affect Michael Thomas in a positive way for fantasy football. I think he's got a definite shot if Jameis is a starter for all 16 games, I think he has a good shot at 1,400 plus yards and double-digit touchdowns. And I think this is the only opportunity to buy on a guy like Michael Thomas in maybe the next 5 years if they get the quarterback play figured out especially. Moving on, next up we have Julio Jones. Now, Julio, I think, is a guy people are just sleeping on far too much. I think people are worried that Julio's just been a thing for so long. I think people have been getting ready in dynasty leagues for him to be getting older. I've been hearing the question for the last 3 years about, is this the year that I sell Julio Jones? Is this the year that I sell Julio Jones? I think people are thinking that sold him last year are really glad that they did, thinking, oh, I sold him a year before he got hurt. I think Julio is going to be good for several more seasons, at least 3 more seasons for fantasy football. And I'll put into context some of those reasons that I think why. Julio is one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. He might not get his credit for it, but he really is. Julio Jones was the fastest wide receiver in NFL history to 12,000 yards, and he did that in only 125 games. And if you compare that to the next up, it was Jerry Rice, and it took Jerry Rice 142 games to get to his first 12,000 receiving yards. Julio Julio is also the only player in NFL history with, Julio in 2019, he finished 6 yards short of 1,400 yards for what would have been a 6th straight season of 14 straight 100-yard seasons. And then last season, when he was injured, so basically he's putting up 1,400 every single year except for this year when he played 7 games. But if you But then if you look at the pace of the games that he started and actually played, like you take out the 2 games that he played 21% of snaps and 35% of snaps so that he was injured in, and just put his pace in the games that he played a full game, he was on pace last year for 1,600 yards, almost 7 touchdowns, and 102 receptions. That to me does not sound like a guy who's lost it at all. I think people are freaking out just because he got hurt last year. I think as long as Matt Ryan is a quarterback there, he's going to be fine for years to come. There was a Ridley scare. I know a lot of people are ranking Ridley higher than Julio Jones. This season, I will not be one of those people. In Dynasty leagues, I definitely understand that. But in redraft leagues and for the next 2 seasons, I would prefer Julio Jones to Calvin Ridley. And we saw Calvin Ridley dominate when Jones was out, but not be quite the same player when Jones was in. I think Jones will definitely dominate the targets when he is playing. He's still the alpha on that team. He's still going to get it. And he's still relatively young. He's still got it. He's 31 last year. He's going into his age 32 season this year. I'm just not that worried. I mean, if you look at a guy like T.O. had 3,000-yard seasons after the age of 32 and double-digit touchdowns. I think Julio Jones could be a guy who could easily, keep knocking 1,400 yards off the shelf for several more years now. Moving on, for our last player of the video, we've got Jonnu Smith. Now, Jonnu's on this list because he's an athletic freak who has never really had a full opportunity to break out, I don't believe, in any city. He's only played for the Titans so far, but I don't think he's been given the opportunity to be a vocal point of an offense. And I think that there's a chance that he gets that opportunity in free agency this year. So Jonnu has never had more than 65 targets in a season. And he ran a 4.62 40 at the combine at 248 pounds. And we've seen his athleticism play out in the NFL. He's made some long plays. He not many players at the tight end position just have that ability at all. So that's something you got to point out. It's like once he has the ball in his hands, he not only is a big man who can be a force in the red zone, caught 8 touchdowns last year, but he can do things with the ball in his hands after the catch or run people over. Like he's a complete athlete, a complete player at the tight end position. And I just think that if he goes there's been a lot of rumors about him going to a team like the New England Patriots or something like that, someone who desperately needs pass-catching weapons. If he gets that 100-target pace or more, gosh forbid, from a good quarterback or a good team, a good organization that can design plays for him to get the ball in creative ways, I think he could definitely be a fantasy boon from wherever he goes. And that's why I think you should acquire him now. I don't think there are many people who are super high on him. They might have been coming into last year, but there's not many people that are super high on him now, especially leaving the Titans, I think. He finished last year at tight end 10 in 14 games, averaging 8.6 points per game. A lot of that was due to the touchdowns that he was able to catch in the first several weeks. But I think if he can get those 100 targets, I think he could be a guy who could be, tight end 5 next year, maybe even higher if he really if he becomes the guy somewhere. But as far as the tight end position, I just think he's a guy you could get who could be a solid starter for you, who's still young, who not many people are really looking out for or looking to acquire at this time. So I think he could be acquired for very little. And I think he could be, a guy who could help you win some fantasy championships in the coming years, potentially, depending on where he lands. So, to recap, if you guys are looking to eat some more W's these next several years in Dynasty, I would look to be buying low on Jameis Winston, especially while these Drew Brees rumors are out there. A.J. Dillon before he's officially the only back left in Green Bay. Michael Thomas, while you can buy him off of his one-off season he's really ever had in the NFL, and while he's going to go be paired with a quarterback who looks like he's going to be even better for him for fantasy football. Julio Jones, who I don't think is as old and as bad as people think he is currently. I think he's got a lot left in the tank. I think he's got about 3 more years of being a borderline wide receiver 1 in fantasy football, at least. And then Jonnu Smith, lastly, who we just talked about, who I think could, join a new team like, the New England Patriots or someone like that who doesn't have many pass-catching weapons, who could get a lot of work and be very good for fantasy. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like down below. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments down below. I will be back with another video later this week talking about guys I would sell high in Dynasty football.